What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? Welcome to today's video. We're working on the RX8 and we are making a cold air intake and we are relocating the battery to the back of the trunk. Now, as simple as these things might be, the key thing for me is we're making this. We're creating it from parts that aren't a kit. So I've got some pipe from Motion Raceworks, pretty amped, aluminum, a 45-degree bend, and a straight aluminum 3.5-inch piece here. Some silicone couplers. I went ahead last night and I cut the mass airflow sensor section off of the stock RX8 airbox because as much as I wish I was a fabricator, as in TIG welder, stainless, all the cool things that look really fun and are really satisfactory to do, I am not. I am a very good fabricator with a MIG welder and mild steel, but not with any of this stuff. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. Don't have a super desire to learn it. However, I can't weld a mass airflow sensor bung to a piece of aluminum pipe. So we've cut this off of the stock airbox, this plastic piece, which measures like 3.5-ish inches in diameter. It's pretty dang close, like 3.6 something. So that's why all that's 3.5. I'm hoping I can just get the silicone coupler over this. But this will house the airflow sensor. The straight piece of pipe is going to go just like this. Bam. Okay, imagine this being cut off shorter. I have a 90 silicone coupler, which is going to go on the end of this. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out of here. This coupler is going to go here and point down like at a 45 like that. And then this 45 is going to connect to that at whatever elevation I need it to. And then ideally, my 800 horsepower big ol' air filter here from K&N is going to sit in this negative pressure area above where all the airflow goes to the radiator. The reason for that, and this is just me thinking, seeing pictures of other people's builds on the internet. My thoughts are, you have this positive pressure zone, right? All this air coming into the radiator, and you don't want to obstruct that flow. As much as we could be WS6 1998 Trans Am with a ram air hood and all this other stuff, we don't need that for an RX8 with 140 horsepower. So my air filter, albeit I want it to catch cool air, I don't want to obstruct the coolant flow, the high pressure area. So we're going to put the air filter up here in this negative pressure area above that so that it can suck the cold air out but not restrict the airflow into the radiator. So that's the premise on that, and we're going to start building that here shortly. The next thing I want to show you, because we're going to build out this stuff too, is the battery relocation. As much as we know, guys, with rotaries, a couple things. We're putting this in the trunk, universal steel battery box, Summit Racing, nothing fancy. We're just going to bolt it to the floor. That ought to fit a giant Optima red top battery, big boy battery. Do not, I repeat, do not mount a lead acid battery inside the car with you. I actually had a buddy who I met through like some Rose Holman engineering stuff. His dad's 65 Mustang had a lead acid battery in the engine bay. Beautiful blue, white stripes, beautiful car. The lead acid battery literally exploded. The alternator overcharged the battery. The lead acid battery exploded in the engine bay, and it corroded valve covers, intake manifold, ruined the carburetor. I mean, this is like a show car. So imagine that happening to you. You do not want a lead acid battery bursting and getting acid and crap on your skin. Gel battery. That was a long story. We're moving it to the back. In order to keep the RX8 cranking, we all know rotaries. Cranky crank, 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 hot start, crank, 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 crank. Oh, we flooded it. Crank, 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 crank. Thin gauge battery relocation wire is going to be, you're going to be, instead of the crank, crank, crank guy, you're going to be the crank, crank, crank guy, especially after you've been heating that wire up. So I've got the big boy, thick boy, huge kit from Summit. It's the thickest one you can get. I think it's like 0 gauge. And the longest one, and dang, copper's expensive. So we got that. We're going to run that down the passenger side all the way back to the front of the car. It'll be in the inside of the cabin. I don't like running stuff under the car, just my rally experience. Rip everything off that's under your car. And that piece is going to connect to this positive wire here. The ground wire in the engine bay, we're going to ground everything that would have touched the battery. You need to make sure on an RX8 that you have all 3 of these ground wires grounded. If you only have one of them grounded, or the red and black one, and not the rest, your car won't run. My first RX8 I bought for super cheap, and all I literally had to do was hook the grounds up, and the car ran perfect. So we'll make sure that this is grounded nicely up here, and then we'll ground the battery in the back. I'm out of breath, but we're ready to get to work. I'm going to start cutting and fabbing and gluing and silicone coupling things together, and then we'll start running a battery cable to the back, and we'll run some big old sheet metal screws into the floor of the trunk back there to hold that battery box down, and we'll get all that stuff done. And if we get all that stuff done fast, maybe we'll start fixing this fuel leak. Let's get to it. Well, Calvin, I've joined the messed up a radiator or AC condenser club. Fortunately, there's 700 million RX8s out there that have blown up engines that I can get a condenser out of. But unfortunately, my car no longer has AC. Oh, I was cutting this piece off and my saw got away from me a little bit, and I've poked a hole in my AC condenser, and breathing all of this stuff in is probably not entirely the best for me. But we're already discharging it, so I don't really have a way to safely discharge it if it's just leaking it out. And I'm mad. Not really, but more weight reduction now, because now we can take AC off and not feel bad about it. Man, I got that thing good. Check that out. Definitely getting some cold air from right through the little vents here. I'm really not feeling like putting that crash bar back on. I think I might just leave that thing out of there. I mean, if we stuff this thing in the wall, it's totaled anyways, right? Like, we're writing it off. That little crash bar, all that's going to do is, like, I guess it keeps my frame rails from crumbling into each other. Okay, we'll see if it fits. I like the air filter location though. Notice, nice big open area. We're not hindering any airflow. We are blocking a little bit right there. But we still have this corner. My AC condenser quit leaking already, or it's leaked all of its guts out. So, I'm pretty happy with that. And largely, under tray still fits pretty bad. And there can be some serious, better ducting up in here. Let me just fix my ducting real quick for you guys. There we go. Nice and tight. So, in another video, we're going to work on improving so that none of this light makes it into that. We don't have any air escaping out the sides. All the air goes through the radiator, and then on these sides, maybe I can fit in this little hole right here some ducting for the brakes. You can see the brakes back there. And then fog light will go away, and I'm going to seal off the oil coolers better, and seal the bottom of them off as well, so that we get more airflow through the coolers. And maybe I'll try to clean the fins up, because they are pretty beat up, as we discovered. So, time to work on battery relocation. Alright guys, check out this cold air intake. It's not all screwed down, but largely that's where it's going to sit. Fits over the fits under the bumper. Pretty amped for that. I did go in here under this, and you can see where I massaged that hole with a hammer to fit that a little bit nicer. It just fits pretty tight in there with this. The 3.5-inch pipe fits perfect, but the pipe with the silicone coupler on it, no dece. So we made that work. I'm amped for how this looks. I think it's going to get plenty of airflow, you know, sitting in here just like that. I think that this is very simple, and I like that there's nothing in here. And with that intake done, let's move to the battery relocation. So, went ahead, we grounded our main batteries right here. I cleaned the rust off of where it's attached, dielectric grease, bolt that down. This is the new positive wire right here, the big red one. I've got some of that, like this stuff right here. Plastic covering stuff over anything that could short out to ground, and it's wrapped up in just like one layer of electrical tape. I hate it whenever you get a car, you're working on something, and it's just covered in electrical tape, and it's like annoying. There's way better ways to do it. This plastic stuff, one wrap of electrical tape done, you can always cut it and pull it off. I liked, in my head, keeping all of this relatively organized in its factory location. You can see if it sits right here, it's not going to get into the pulleys at all. This is where this stuff would have been zip tied to the air box anyways. So the wires are like the proper length and all of that stuff. So everything is jiving right here, and I'm liking it. I ran the positive wire underneath the ECU over here under the washer sprayer. I drilled a hole. Now, there's a little stud. It's going to be impossible for me to show you this. There's a stud that holds the blower motor to the firewall. You can see the stud where they pushed it in from this side right down here, and I could see that on the inside, so I could see that I had clear space right above it. So that's where I drilled my hole. I used some silicone. I drilled it and walled it out enough so it's like barely loose in here, but it's still pretty tight. And I used some silicone vacuum line. You just cut a slit in it, wrap that up. It's like a grommet. So that's what I've got there. The red wire continues running down inside the car, comes out, down through here. I ran it through the factory wiring trays so that I can put the factory trim piece back on, which is this. That'll go back on there now. The wire follows the factory harness up to the very back of the car. And once we get back here, we have our battery box or battery bracket with our battery. Now, yes, I know this is a lead acid battery. I have it in here temporarily. But to show you this, my Optima Red Top is on order. Solid as heck, guys. That thing ain't going nowhere. It does wiggle a little bit, just the battery with this bracket. But the bracket mounted to the floor, big washers, big sheet metal screws, not going anywhere. Amped with how that turned out. So, and a good test. It's not hooked up to where I can start it, but if I don't get killed by this door, because we're doing a wheelie, we should, if I put the key in, have power. Look at that. And we are out of gas, because we're on a hill. So, overall, guys, a successful evening. I am amped to have both of those things done. I will probably, and this is where this is super nice with how this battery's hooked up, right? If I wanted to ever like track race, do this, that, and the other with the car, with the battery being in the trunk, we can mount a kill switch back here on the trunk to shut the car off. And with this long wire being ran all the way up here through this little area too, man, I can smell that fuel leak. Running through right here, it's very easy to just cut this wire, bring it up here, mount a kill switch somewhere, run to the thing. That away, anytime, crash it, they can shut the whole thing off. Easy peasy. So, I'm stoked for that. But, that's the end of the night for me, the end of the video for you. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm stoked that we got the black and blue engine all done. Got that thing back to the guys putting it in their car. Fixed. Always something with project cars. You can never get stuff done. Perfect. And faulty parts. So that's done, and we're back to cranking on the RX8. So as I mentioned earlier, the next video, we're sorting out ductwork on this thing. and ideally fixing my fuel leak. So we'll pull the intake manifold off. One thing that's really inconvenient about that giant strut brace is that it has to come off to get the intake manifold off. So we got it out of the way. That's done, that's done, that's done. We're just checking off boxes, guys. Track day's not for a couple weeks, so we've got time. But I like to get stuff done ASAP, especially on my own cars. And then we can get to working on engines and stuff. So maybe we'll polish the headlights. But with that, thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video. If you want to learn about rotary engines, you want to learn about rebuilding these engines, you want to learn about just these old cars in general, first gens, I got a bunch of first gen stuff. Anyways, go check out the other videos on the channel. Subscribe if it interests you. Subscribe if you want to learn. Comment below any questions that you have on these cars. And then subscribe so when I make the video, I can answer your questions. Thank you guys a whole bunch for watching as usual. Keep it rad. We'll see you in the next one. Letty, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Oh my gosh. Dog's on the porch. We'll go say hi. The RX8's the best Mazda chassis ever. Don't jump if yes. I like the old stuff. Check out the daily. 1983 CJ7. I've had this thing forever. Finally got everything done, running, driving. Been driving it every day this week. Peace, guys.